probably never imagined that the woman he abandoned with a sick child and empty hands would one day own such an empire. He never imagined that I, who once stared at the blank walls of a tiny apartment, terrified of the future, would now look out from my office window at the Chicago skyscrapers I helped build. And him, he's standing right outside, behind the doors of the company that bears my daughter's shining name. He's come to beg. For a second chance, for a moment's glance, he has fallen at my feet. This is my incredible story. A story that began with tears, but ended with a strength I never thought I possessed. He left me for poverty with a sick child, saying, "You'll never amount to anything." He had no idea that 5 years later, he would be on his knees at the door of this very company, begging for a job. My story, like many stories, began with love. I was Sarah, a civil engineering student full of dreams of building bridges and skyscrapers. He was Ethan, a charming business student who promised to lay the world at my feet. We met on campus, and I quickly fell for his laughter, his excitement for the future, and his sweet promises. He always used to say, "Sarah, you'll build the towers, and I'll sell them to the world together. We'll build an empire." And I believed in that dream with all my heart. We got married. Our life was simple but full of love. We wove dreams in a small rented apartment. I worked at a small engineering firm, and Ethan worked in a trading company. Our salaries barely lasted to the end of the month, but it didn't matter because we had each other. Our happiness was complete when Lily was given to us. A girl with eyes that seemed to hold the entire galaxy, she became my whole world. But this joy didn't last long. My little Lily was constantly sick from the very first months. Her dry coughs and short, sharp breaths filled our nights with fear and sleeplessness. The doctor's diagnosis hit me like a sledgehammer, a rare respiratory illness that required constant care and expensive medications. My rosy world suddenly turned grey. From that day on, everything changed. All our income went towards Lily's treatment. There were no more romantic dinners, no short trips, no small purchases. Everything was sacrificed for my daughter's breaths. At first, Ethan was with me. He loved Lily, but the heavy shadow of poverty was weighing on his love. I could see how his gaze turned cold at the long list of medications. When I came home exhausted from work and the hospital and spoke of hope, he would say sarcastically, "Hope? Hope doesn't pay the bills, Sarah. Hope can't save us from this hovel." He was no longer the dreamy Ethan. He had become a man who searched for happiness on his calculator. He started coming home late, smelling of expensive, unfamiliar perfumes. When I asked where he'd been, he'd answer irritably, "A business meeting, looking for money for this life." But his eyes were lying. The distance between us was no longer just physical. It was a deep chasm that grew deeper every day. I knew there was another woman. I could feel it. But I was so consumed by my daughter's pain and suffering that I had no strength left to fight for my own life. All my energy was spent on ensuring Lily had one peaceful night's sleep, one day with fewer coughs, and that I could afford her next inhaler. In my world, there was no room for jealousy. There was only fear and a mother's love. The breaking point came on a rainy evening. I had spent the entire day at the hospital with Lily. The doctors had mentioned a new treatment method, costly, but with a high chance of success. With a heart full of hope and, of course, worry, I returned home to talk to Ethan. When I arrived, I saw him standing by the door with his suitcase packed. His gaze was cold and resolute. There was no trace of the man who once read me poetry. My heart sank. With a voice that barely came out, I asked, "Are you going somewhere?" He gave a smirk so bitter it chilled me to the bone. "Yeah, Sarah, I'm leaving. I'm going somewhere I can breathe. Somewhere I don't have to wake up every morning to the thought of debt and the sound of coughing." I couldn't believe it. I said, "Ethan, Lily, she needs us. The doctors found a new way." He cut me off, shouting, "More money! More expenses! I'm tired, Sarah. I didn't put my youth into this life just to work and pay for medicine and doctors for the rest of my life. I want a better life, a luxurious life, something you can never give me." And then he said the words that scarred my soul forever. He looked me straight in the eye and said with utter cruelty, "You and your sick daughter have always been a weight tied to my ankle, a burden. I'm leaving to be with someone who appreciates me, someone who can give me the future I deserve. You'll always be struggling in this poverty and misery. This is your destiny." My tears flowed uncontrollably. I begged, not for myself, but for Lily. I said, "Please don't go. At least for our child." He looked at me with contempt. He pulled a wad of cash from his pocket and threw it on the table. "This should be enough for a few months. After that, you're on your own." Then he picked up his suitcase and, without a single glance back, left, slamming the door behind him. The sound of the door closing was like the sound of all my bones breaking. I fell to my knees. In that cold, dark apartment, I was left with a sick daughter and an uncertain future. That night, I wasn't just an abandoned woman. I was a human whose entire belief in love and dreams had been crushed under the rubble of a man's cruel words. I felt like the world had ended. But at the peak of despair, I looked at the innocent face of Lily, coughing in her sleep. In that moment, deep in the darkness, a spark ignited within me. I realized I no longer had the right to be weak. I had to fight for this little angel, even if it meant moving mountains alone. The days after Ethan left were the hardest of my life. Every corner of the house brought back a memory, and every memory was a dagger to my heart, but I had no time to grieve. Lily needed me. The medical costs were staggering, and the money Ethan had left was quickly vanishing. The first step was to find a better paying job. My previous salary couldn't even cover our normal living expenses, let alone Lily's treatment. With my degree in civil engineering, I scoured the city. But no company was willing to take the risk of hiring a single mother with a sick child. I needed flexible hours and the option to work remotely, and in the rigid, male-dominated world of engineering, these were luxuries. After dozens of interviews and hearing no time and again, I was starting to lose hope. One night, as Lily slept in my arms, I was looking at my old university designs when I broke down in tears. It felt as if all my dreams were destined to be buried between medicine bottles and bills. Just then, my eye caught one of my designs. a conceptual suspension bridge inspired by a honeycomb structure, lightweight, durable, and with a much lower construction cost than common models. An idea sparked in my mind. Why wait for someone to give me a job? I could be my own boss. I decided to work as a freelancer. I set up a small desk in a corner of the room, fired up my old laptop, and began. At night, after Lily was asleep, I would stay up until dawn, taking on small projects, the plan for a small villa, structural calculations for a warehouse, supervising the renovation of an apartment. My income was small, but it gave me independence. I no longer had to beg anyone for a day off to take Lily to the doctor. Meanwhile, news of Ethan reached me. He had married a wealthy woman. I saw their pictures on social media. International trips, luxury cars, glamorous parties. He had gotten the life he wanted. Every picture was a new wound, but at the same time, it fueled my motivation. Every time I felt exhausted, Ethan's contemptuous face and his final words echoed in my mind. You'll always be struggling in this poverty and misery. Instead of breaking me, that sentence became the fuel for my engine. One day, while reading construction industry news, I came across an announcement. The government had issued a public tender for the construction of the Liberty Bridge, the largest infrastructure project in the country. Giant engineering firms were sharpening their teeth for this contract. Reading that announcement was like a jolt. Everyone knew this was a game for the big players. But there, in my tiny apartment, a crazy thought came to me. My old design, that honeycomb bridge, was perfect for such a project. It could reduce costs by up to 40% and cut the construction time in half. It was a huge gamble. Participating in such a tender was a job that a large team of engineers would spend months on, and I was alone. When I told my friends, they tried to talk me out of it. Sarah, this isn't for you. Don't exhaust yourself. You'll only be disappointed. But my mind was made up. This wasn't just a project. It was my chance to prove myself. For the next 2 months, my life was consumed by work. Days were for caring for Lily, and nights were my battle with numbers and blueprints. Coffee was my only friend on those long nights. I came to the brink of giving up many times, but each time, looking at my daughter's face, I got back up. Success in this project wasn't just about money. It was about securing the funds for Lily's definitive treatment. It was about a future where no one could ever humiliate us for being poor. I was designing a bridge, but in reality, I was building a bridge from my ruined past to the future. The day of the presentation for the tender was one of the most stressful days of my life. Dressed in a simple suit I had borrowed, I walked into the conference hall of the Ministry of Transportation. The hall was filled with executives in expensive suits, sipping coffee with confidence. Among them, I was an oddity, a young woman, all alone. I could feel their heavy stares and whispers. When my name was called as one of the presenters, a mocking silence fell over the room. With trembling legs, I walked to the podium. For a moment, Ethan's voice echoed in my ear. You'll never amount to anything. But then, I closed my eyes and pictured Lily's face. I took a deep breath and began. My voice trembled at first, but the more I explained my design, the product of my sleepless nights and my hopes, the stronger I became. I spoke with passion and enthusiasm about how, by taking inspiration from nature, we could build a bridge that was not only cheaper and faster to construct, but also more durable. My presentation, unlike the others, was a story. The story of solving a problem with creativity. When I finished, there was silence. Then, one of the judges, a renowned professor, began to applaud, and the others joined him. The following days were spent in anxiety. I knew I had a slim chance. Those companies had powerful lobbies. What did I have? Just an idea. A week later, my phone rang. It was the minister's office. My heart was about to leap out of my chest. The man on the other end said, "Ms. Sarah Miller, congratulations. Your design has won the Liberty Bridge tender." I couldn't speak. The phone trembled in my hand. The man laughed and repeated, "Ma'am, you've won the biggest tender in the country's history. You need to come to the Capitol to sign the contract." After hanging up, I sat on the floor and cried out loud. Tears of joy and victory. I hugged Lily tightly, who was looking at me with surprise, and whispered in her ear, "We did it, my love. We did it. Our new life starts today." That moment was a miracle I had built with my bare hands. On that day, the victimized and broken Sarah died forever, and Sarah the builder was born. Winning the tender was just the beginning. I had to turn my design into reality. With the advance payment, I rented a small office and named it Lily Build Engineering. In honor of the girl who was the reason for all this fighting, I hired a few young creative engineers who were as motivated as I was. The Liberty Bridge project was a colossal challenge. We worked day and night. I was no longer just a designer. I was the manager of a national project. At the same time, I found the best doctors for Lily's treatment, and seeing her condition improve was the greatest reward for all my hardships. As the project progressed, the names Lily Build and Sarah Miller became famous. The media came to me, and the story of a single mother who defeated engineering giants became fascinating to everyone. My company grew rapidly, and we won other major projects. The empire Ethan had dreamed of was now being built by my hands. And Ethan, fate had written a different story for him. Happiness built on a foundation of money is like a house of sand. With the first economic crisis, his father-in-law's business collapsed. They lost everything. Ethan, who had grown accustomed to that life, couldn't handle the fall. And just as he had left me for money, his new wife threw him out of her life for becoming poor, bankrupt, and alone. He was back at square one, a broken man who had tasted humiliation. It was as if the universe was settling old scores. He had once told me I would struggle in poverty, and now it was he who was drowning in the mire of his own wrong choices. If this story was inspiring to you and you believe in the power of will, we would be happy if you followed our channel. This motivates us to tell you more amazing stories. Please share your own similar experiences and thoughts in the comments section. Perhaps your story will inspire someone else. 5 years had passed since the day Ethan left me. The Liberty Bridge had been inaugurated in all its glory, and Lily Build was one of the most reputable engineering firms in North America. My Lily was now a happy, healthy little girl whose laughter colored my life. One afternoon, my secretary said hesitantly, "Ma'am, a gentleman named Ethan Parker is at the door. He insists on seeing you." My heart stopped. Ethan. After all these years, I kept my composure and said, "Let him in." The man who entered bore little resemblance to the Ethan I knew, broken, thin, with streaks of white in his hair and a look of deep shame. He looked at my lavish office, the blueprints, and the photo of me and Lily on my desk with profound regret. He finally broke the silence and said in a trembling voice, "Sarah, I was wrong." He came forward and fell to his knees. "I made the biggest mistake of my life. I was a fool to think money brings happiness. These past few years have been hell for me. Forgive me. Give me a chance. I'll do anything you say. I'm even willing to mop the floors of your office. Just let me be near you." I looked at him, at the man who was once my world and who had brought that same world crashing down on me. There was no hatred left in my heart, only pity. I stood up from my chair and said softly, "Get up, Ethan." When he stood, I looked into his eyes, and with a calmness born from storms, I said, "I forgave you a long time ago, not for you, but for me, because I didn't want to carry the burden of resentment. I had to let go so I could fly." I paused, then continued, "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, nor does it mean returning to the past. There is no longer a place for you in my life or my daughter's. You chose your path, and I built my own. My success wasn't my revenge on you. It was my proof to myself." I turned and looked out the window at the magnificent bridge shining in the distance. "I hope you can find your own way too. But here, in this empire that I built, there is no place for you." Without waiting for his reply, I walked out of the room, leaving him alone with his shattered past, just as he had once left me alone with an uncertain future. That night, beside Lily, who slept peacefully, I looked at the city spread beneath me. No wound weighed on my soul anymore. I had risen like a phoenix from the ashes of my broken life, and I understood that the greatest structure I had ever built in my life was not that massive bridge, but the new life I had forged for myself and my daughter, a true empire built on love, will, and self-belief.